In the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog.
What is there to even say about Dark Souls at this point? A game that gained popularity from its supposedly brutal but surprisingly fair difficulty, to warranted but sometimes very comedic effect. And nowadays, it's more known for being considered one of the greatest games ever made, with level design that loves to loop back on itself. There's a ton of videos on Dark Souls ranging from reviews, to retrospectives, to challenge runs, to boss rankings. Will this video cover anything like that? Yes. Will it offer any fresh or new information? No, not at all. It's just another Dark Souls retrospective review, whatever you want to call it, sort of video. And I'm making it because I wanted an excuse to replay this game before Shadow of the Erdtree dropped. Now, and as for the intro, it's probably the best one From Software has done, and I think it speaks for itself.
Nito, the first of the dead. The Witch of Izalith and her daughters of Chaos. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, and his faithful knights. And the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten. With the strength of lords, they challenged the dragons. Gwyn's mighty bolts peeled apart their stone scales. The witches weaved great firestorms. Nito unleashed a miasma of death and disease. And Seath the Scaleless betrayed his own, and the dragons were no more. Thus began the Age of Fire. But soon the flames will fade, and only dark will remain. Even now, there are only embers. And man sees not light, but only endless nights. And amongst the living are seen carriers of the accursed dark side.
Whenever starting the game, I'm going to highly recommend you take the Master Key, unless you're doing a challenge run, because you'll just be making things much harder on yourself if you don't grab it now. The hero of our journey is a man by the name of Mo Ran. He holds near limitless stamina and the strength of 2.5 men, but he has no idea what's going on 95% of the time. But will he be the one to save us? Possibly. Only time will tell. However, we have a bit of an issue because we've already been captured and locked up. Not to worry, however, because a corpse that has our key conveniently drops in thanks to the help of a mysterious knight. I'm sure this will be a character that will live a long time and be very helpful throughout our journey. Now, the controls in this game are actually fairly standard. You move with the left stick, turn your camera with the right, you can lock on by clicking down on the right stick, but where it kind of differentiates itself is that melee is all done with the left and right triggers, and also the left and right bumpers, which is fairly commonplace for From Software games these days, but it's a little bit more out there for back when it came out. At least it was for me. So, we make our way to leave the asylum, and that looks concerning. I'm sure it'll be fine. Well, not to worry, it's the first boss. We can probably beat this guy. Okay, in all seriousness, you can try punching this boss to death, but it's a very, very long process, and without healing, it's going to be a rough time. If you do win, you get his weapon, but the stat requirements on it are so high that it's very clearly designed for New Game Plus. I gave it an honest attempt to punch him to death, but unfortunately, no dice. Anyways, now that we've respawned, I do gotta ask, what's causing that thudding noise anyways? Oh. Anyways, for real this time, what you actually want to do is run past the demon and into the door on the left side to make your escape into the next part of the Undead Asylum. Now, we can finally pick up our actual weapons and not just that terrible sword hilt. The rest of the asylum is mostly straightforward, at least, not counting the giant wrecking ball that comes rolling down towards you. But if we follow the new opening, we can speak to the knight from earlier. Unfortunately, he seems to have gotten roughed up, but he gives us some words of wisdoms and the Estus Flask, which is our main healing item of this game. On a different note, anyone else ever wonder what Estus actually tastes like? Its appearance always made me think of Sunny D. But, I'm just kind of rambling at this point.
Now you know. And I can die with hope in my heart. Oh, one more thing. Here, take this.
Viewing that scene is mandatory, but after that's done, you just sort of learn a few extra pieces of the game and how its mechanics work. You may learn some things like locking on, and depending on your job class, you may get your additional weapon here at the top. But for the most part, it's a fairly easy time. It's the tutorial. They're not really going to throw their hardest stuff at you right away. When you're ready, step through the fog gate and you'll notice that now we have the high ground over the Asylum demon. I would say sit here, bask in your victory, and that was supposed to kill me. The Asylum Demon is about as simple as you'd expect from a first boss, but he's not a bad fight whatsoever. All his moves are easy to see and well telegraphed, though his attacks can be so slow they actually threw me off a little bit. You can block everything he does with your shield and just cut into him for about a minute, and hey, when he goes down, you're finally free to leave the Asylum. It's a simple fight, but it's not a bad one. I think it does a good job getting the player encouraged and learning, yes, those who are prepared will be able to survive, and not only that, they'll be able to win. With the Asylum Demon dead and the big Pilgrim's Key in tow, we can finally leave this place and get to the main world of Lordran.
Only in the ancient legends it is stated that one day an undead shall be chosen. To leave the undead asylum in pilgrimage to the land of the ancient lords. Lordran.
Now, I'm sorry to break whatever immersion you may have had, but this is the best place I could mention it. Every time you start a new game of Dark Souls 1, you need to take at least one death-defying run into dangerous areas for some great items. Unless you're doing a no-death run, in which case, don't do this. Or be very careful when you do this. Most importantly, head down to New Londo Ruins, where the spooky ghosts live, and snag yourself a Firekeeper soul. This will permanently upgrade your healing items. What you'll just need to do is take it over to the Firekeeper, something that for some reason I didn't do until after the second or third boss. Otherwise, I would say check out the graveyard area to collect any weapons you may want there, such as the Zweihander and the Wing Spear. Now, it's time to begin the game for real. You'll want to head up to where you see an aqueduct, as that's the intended next location for the game. We're now going to be entering the Undead Burg, the first proper level of Dark Souls 1. And while it may seem linear on the surface, if you break those barrels, it'll take you to a lower path that you can go down and find some treasure, and when you're done, climb back up the ladder, and you'll end up in a spot that you begin the level at. Working your way through the enemies, the Hellkite Drake will make its appearance before flying off, leaving you with two separate choices. Either head forward for progress, or head to the right for a little bit of extra content. I recommend taking out the enemies in the area, then heading right so you can run into your first proper merchant. He's going to sell you a lot of the basics, but what I would recommend most is grabbing yourself a bow. It could be a long bow, short bow, whatever. It doesn't have to be amazing. Even the basic short bow is plenty, and that's what I'll be using for this run through. But you'll want something that you can use to handle enemies at range, and more importantly, just to kite them. Separating opponents and taking on one or two at a time, as opposed to 5 or 6, is going to make a massive difference in this game. And even the most... After you have a bow in hand, it's time to head back towards progress to come across your first bonfire in the Undead Burg. Get it, you're going to need it. And from here, we simply make our way through the Burg, avoiding enemies, throwing firebombs, and if you have the Master Key, you can access a house that has a treasure chest in it for some gold pine resin that gives your weapon a nifty little lightning buff, but it's by no means required. Basic opponents are able to kill you if you get careless. There's also a somewhat menacing looking optional mini-boss fight chilling out in the Undead Burg, and this enemy is known as the Black Knight. This is going to be one of the strongest foes in the game, and here he's an optional challenge to check to see if you've learned how to parry or at least deal with much tougher opponents. If you do, he's a cakewalk. If not, I wish you the best of luck, because it's going to be tough. Now, if you take him out, every Black Knight has a chance to drop an item known as Titanite, which is a piece of upgrade material for your weapons, and each Black Knight has a chance to drop whatever weapon it is that they're holding. In this case, the Black Knight sword, and hey, I was actually able to get lucky and collect one. These are some really strong weapons, and they do additional damage against demon enemies, so yeah, if you're able to get one, keep it. It'll carry you hard. Of course, there is one Black Knight weapon in particular that breaks this game in half, and oh boy, when we get to it, well, I'll talk about it. Now, as for why you would fight the Black Knight, other than the chance at getting his drops, he's guarding an item known as the Blue Tearstone Ring. Rings are your main accessories that give you different sorts of passive buffs or some other advantage. The Blue Tearstone Ring is unfortunately kind of useless, as it increases your defense when you're low on HP. Don't really think I need to tell you why this ring isn't very good. After you've taken care of the Black Knight, there's really not much left to the Undead Burg, so you're going to pretty quickly see the entrance to the boss arena. And you'll notice there's nothing here. Well, that's a lie. Turn your butt around, because there are some undead archers that are going to harass you if you don't take them out now. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this design point, because yes, it does tell the player to be observant, and that's good. But the game basically never does this outside of this one boss fight. There's no other boss where you can really do this unless you're doing some sort of co-op shenanigans. Either way, it's time for a boss fight against the Taurus Demon, and he's honestly a little bit less interesting than the Asylum Demon. I will give some serious credit for the bridged arena, as it gives you a way to do multiple plunging attacks, and I feel like it's okay to do one here since I skipped one on the Asylum demon. But otherwise, the fight uses the same swipes and slams, and it actually has a smaller moveset because he doesn't have the ass crash attack. It's not a very fantastic boss. Hell, I wouldn't even really call it good. It doesn't stand out either because, spoilers, this guy is just a reskinned version of a regular enemy with very slightly more HP. And the music, while I like it, and for some strange reason it's labeled as Taurus Demon even though it first played for Asylum Demon, is... well, it fooled me into thinking this game was going to have generic boss themes. After you're done, head on through, and we'll finally get to meet a friendly NPC and talk to one of the few comforts in this unfriendly world, Solaire. Now, if you speak with him more than once, he'll also give you the white soapstone, allowing you to engage in multiplayer, or as he words it, jolly cooperation. I also feel I should mention this is pretty much the one and only time in the game that it even really tries to justify why there's multiplayer, or the summoning system, or the invasion system, or any of that fun stuff.
How much longer your world and mine will remain in conflict, but you two, to summon one another in spirit, cross the gaps between worlds, and engage in jolly cooperation. Of course, we are not the only ones engaged in this, but I am a wanderer of the sun. Spot my summon signature eager by its brilliant aura. If you miss it, you must be blind.
Now, you see this bridge with all these enemies, the scorch marks on the ground? Well, I could make a joke that ends with me dying for comedic effect, but I really don't want to do that, so I'm just going to give you some advice here. Make sure to hang right, and run like your life depends on it, because, trust me, it does. You want to get to the lower level of the bridge as fast as you can, and try to avoid taking the worst of the fire. Now, from here, you can actually go and find a ladder that you can kick down, and that will give you a shortcut back to this point from your Undead Berg bonfire. As I did mention earlier, this world is heavily interconnected, and if you're a person who loves shortcuts and you somehow haven't already played this game, oh, you will love this game. The Undead Parish starts off by throwing both a Black Knight with a greatsword and an Armored Boar mini-boss at you right away. You're going to see a notable uptick in difficulty in the Undead Parish as most of the random hollows are gone, with the hollow soldiers taking the position of the lowest grunts, while the higher level enemies are going to be filled with newer opponents known as something called the Balder Knights. They're not as strong as Black Knights, but they're very capable early game foes, and unlike most enemies, they can actually parry your attacks. Now, I'm going to warn you, don't go into the Church of the Undead Parish yet. You will have some serious issues, and instead hang right, as you'll come across a Balder Knight, which again can be tough, but they're not as bad as some of the other enemies, and hey, if you're lucky, or really patient, you can actually farm them for the Balder Sidesword, which is arguably the best one-handed weapon in the game, though I'll admit I always prefer the Claymore myself. Now, on this side path, we get to encounter our friendly blacksmith, Andre of Astora. On top of that, we also get arguably the second most important bonfire in the game, as it's connected to a lot of other regions. So yeah, really good one you'll want to get, and one I'd recommend kindling. But of course, let's take a little side path and head down to come across a mini-boss known as the Titanite Demon. These guys are janky and a pain in the ass, and I really don't like fighting them, but they do at least give decent soul rewards, and once you've kind of gotten more used to their jank, they're not too hard to bring down. In fact, they're actually one of the easiest things to bring down if you are able to just hug the corner. That being said, due to the level design, where you fight these guys, hugging the corner or hugging their side will not always be an option. Now, aside from where that Titanite demon is, the other path we can see is one that leads to an area known as Sin's Fortress. We can't really do anything here right now because it's currently locked up, unless you're doing a specific glitch that speedrunners like to exploit. So, yeah, don't try to go in here right now. You won't make it very far. And while we're here, I'll mention a few things. So Andre's purpose, other than being a blacksmith, is he's also a bit of a merchant, as he'll sell you the other basic weapon types. So if the, say, deprived club isn't working out for you, you can swap to a longsword like a sensible person. Though by this point, you should have access to both the claymore from the bridge with the Hellgate Drake, and possibly even the Drake sword if you spent the time to shoot his tail off. Otherwise, there's also a lot of NPC questlines in this game, and I won't be covering all of them in this video because of just how many there are, but I'll touch up on some of the major ones. Either way, that's enough sideshow for now, so let's get back to the main progress and work our way into the church, where you have not one but two separate mini-bosses inside. The Berenique Knight is a big, towering enemy that honestly isn't nearly as strong as he looks like he's going to be. I'm not sure what the purpose there is to fighting them outside of this very first one in particular, because he guards the first Firekeeper soul that you're intended to collect, assuming you don't do those crazy death runs into New Londo Ruins. Meanwhile, the other of the two mini-bosses is an enemy known as the Channeler, and I really hate these things. All they mainly do is either fire soul arrows at you, or they do a funny dance that ends up buffing all the enemies around them. And while this one's not too bad, as he's only going to buff the basic hollows, there are some examples later where they buff monsters and give them enough attack power to kill you in one shot very easily, and with very swarmy enemies at that. Also, I lied, we're not making progress, because we're going to be taking this elevator, and you're going to realize just how much this world truly does loop back on itself. Because once you ride the elevator down to the bottom, well, take a look. We're back in Firelink Shrine, where we began the game. Congratulations, you now have yet another shortcut back to other parts of the world, and you actually have a really good shortcut to the boss. Now, otherwise, resist the urge to kill Petrus and speak with Anastasia, or I guess in this case just interact with Anastasia, and give her your Firekeeper soul to get your Estus Flask up to +2. This will be more than good enough to get you through the early game. Now, back at the top of the church, ignore that hallway. That starts an annoying side quest that you don't even need to do to get the main reward, and it's not even worth doing in the first place because you just get a Covenant item. Otherwise, we can climb the ladder, and for new players, I would recommend being human for this boss fight, because this is the first boss that I think can really give you some trouble, and if you're in your human form, well, you'll be able to summon Solaire for the battle. Now, this can be the first potentially difficult boss fight in the game, so I would recommend bringing along Solaire for new players, as I mentioned a moment ago. But when we enter the room, there's nothing here, but I shot the statue and it bled, but the other one didn't. That's weird. Okay, now, for real, the Gargoyle is much faster than previous bosses, and he still has a lot of wide sweeping moves, while also being able to take to the sky and breathe fire. This is the first boss where you can cut off his tail in order to obtain a new weapon, the Gargoyle Tail Axe. Unfortunately, the Gargoyle Tail Axe is terrible. One of the worst weapons in the entire game, by far. Otherwise, at half HP, A second gargoyle will join, while also at half HP, to help, but if you have something like the Drake Sword, these guys are going to crumble in mere seconds. And now we can ascend the tower and ring our first Bell of Awakening. Congratulations, if you've made it this far, you've completed your first major objective in Dark Souls. Now, after the Bell of Awakening has been rung, a few things will change. You'll go back to Firelink's Shrine, and you'll see an NPC named Lautrec here. Lautrec is an asshole, and the smart thing to do would be to kill him right here and now to get his equipment. However, my character has an intelligence stat of 9, so we're going to let him live. Let's just say for the sake of world building. Kind of more so because I think the fight you get later is a little bit funnier. Otherwise, the other big changes are that you can now go and speak with a man known as Oswald of Kareem. He's going to appear in the bell tower where you fought the gargoyles. And there's two things you can do. If you've attacked NPCs and want forgiveness, or if you've done some other thing that the game cuts us in, he's the forgiveness system that was sorely missing from Demon Souls. And he's also a bit of a merchant, as he'll sell you some very weird spells and items, but he also sells the ever-useful Purging Stone. This is an item that dispels the Curse status effect, and while it's rare, the Curse status effect is by far the most dangerous in the game, as it will permanently halve your HP until it's dispelled. Now what's terrifying is that in lore, it's impossible to dispel a curse unless you pass it on to someone else, so those Purging Stones are people. Now, at this point, with the Master Key, you can actually head right to the next dungeon that contains a Bell of Awakening and kill the boss, but we do have some other dungeons I'm going to be showing off that you're meant to tackle before you go there. But before we even do that, well, let's get a bit of cleanup and other side things handled. First of all, if you go into the tower where you fought the Taurus Demon, and instead you use your Master Key to head downwards, you'll come across an NPC known as Havel the Rock, or known to some as the Slam Jam, because he's wielding a dragon's tooth, and yeah, let's just say it's a very fast way to get pancaked. Now, inside Darkroot Garden, there's actually an optional Black Knight you can face that wields a halberd, and out of all the Black Knight variants, the halberd variant is, in my opinion, the most difficult, because they're... honestly, I can't parry these guys to save my life. I can parry the other three, no issue, but this one always just felt off to me, and the Black Knight halberd is a much stronger weapon than the other variants. And that doesn't just apply to the knights, that also applies to you. If you kill this Black Knight, and he drops the Black Knight halberd, congratulations, you've won the game. In fact, the speed run revolves around killing this guy and getting his weapon drop. The other benefit of coming down here is getting the Grass Crest Shield, which does have good physical defense, but it also gives you increased stamina recovery. Outside of some cool armor sets and a very, very strong ring, there's not too terribly much for us in Darkroot Garden, or at least the Darkroot Basin part of it, but at the very least it does provide some good rewards for exploring, and there's an easy enough optional boss we can take down that'll get us, well, some really good rewards going forward. And so it's time for our first optional boss of the game, the Moonlight Butterfly, or as it's better known, Moonlight Butter Doesn't Fly, you idiot. Okay, references aside, this is either a very, very easy fight or an easy and annoying fight. With a ranged weapon, you can dodge and return some fire at a reasonable pace, but if you're melee only, prepare to wait a while for it to land, because it has to rest and eat the grasses. Thankfully, with Beatrice here, it's... well, she's more than strong enough to absolutely slaughter this boss, and I recommend it because this fight isn't even remotely hard, it's just super tedious. Now, defeating the butterfly, you'll see it's the first opponent to drop a boss soul, which can be used to create boss weapons, but that's a mechanic I'm not going to be engaging with in this playthrough, and more importantly, you can't even engage with it until you're about halfway through the game. So, I'd say the bigger reward here is the watchtower area you're able to go up to, because it will allow you to get the watchtower key, which is how you can fight Havel if you don't have the master key. And it gets you the Divine Ember, which, if you give to Andre, he can use to create you holy weapons. You're really going to want at least one holy weapon later on in this game, and for those who played this game, you probably already know the area I'm talking about. Now, after you head to where you met Solaire and the Hellkite Drake, use your basement key to reach the lower Undead Burg, where you'll be introduced to the Dark Souls dogs, so I hope you have a shield or you're gonna get mobbed quickly, and shortly after, well, let's just say the dogs aren't even the worst enemies in this place. Because this place is home to the undead, or I guess maybe the Hollow Thief enemies. The first time through, you can kill them through the walls, but once they come out, they're just a pain in the ass. They like to go for backstabs, and they like to go for a lot of critical strikes. I don't like them, and I'm very glad that they only appear at this one point in the entire game. I'm also glad that the lower Undead Burg is a mercifully short location that you really don't spend much time at all. I'm also going to recommend that you skip going right to the boss arena and instead go down below where the arena is, because there's a few more undead thieves hanging out down here, but thankfully their AI is broken and very stupid. Going this way will also lead you to a merchant, and it gets you on the other side of the aqueduct from how you first got into the Undead Burg. So open that up and you have yet another, maybe not necessarily a shortcut, but an alternative way back, and it gives you a way back to the boss that lets you skip the worst of the Hollow Thieves and all the dogs. And unlike some fights, unfortunately, the run back actually does matter here, because there is a very, very realistic chance that you'll die to this boss fight. Why? Because it's one of the worst bosses in the game, and it's a contender for the worst boss in the game, though it's probably not going to be getting first place. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the Capra Demon. Sup bro, you like dogs? Well, I hope you do, because Capra's gonna start this fight accompanied by two canine companions in a boss arena the size of a shoebox, and this fight depends almost entirely on one thing. Can you kill the two dogs quickly? If you can, the rest of the fight is pretty much a cakewalk, as all Capra's gonna do is swing around his two swords, and just remember to dodge roll his jump attack instead of blocking, because that will pierce your guard. Capra is overall a very simple boss, and if it weren't for the dogs, I think it would have been remembered decently well as an early game challenge, and a way to show that sometimes rolling is better than blocking. But with the dogs, it's a dreadful time, and due to the weird staircase in the arena, it ends up becoming yet another just plunge attack boss, so it's like, what's the point of this? You haven't really learned anything, and the Capra Demon isn't even a unique boss. In fact, this is going to become a very annoying enemy later on in the game, where it gets copy-pasted way too much. For those who've played this game, they know exactly the point I am talking about, and for those who haven't played this game, well, don't worry, you'll see. Otherwise, after you kill Capra Demon, if you head back to the Firelink Shrine, you'll end up seeing Patris's companions have arrived, though, to be honest, the only one that really matters is the Priestess Rhea, as she's going to play a somewhat notable role later on in the game, at least if you do have anything to do with miracles. The other two are just red shirts that will die very shortly after. Heck, Nico doesn't even talk, he just does incoherent mumbling. Yeah, these guys aren't exactly anybody's favorite characters. I'd be surprised if they were. Either way, with Capra dead, we have the key to the depths, which is next to the lower burg anyways, so let's go on there. The depths is a pretty nasty and potentially very rough area, so I'll try to provide one of the most quick and painless guides I can through this place, but I can't promise it'll be perfect. Either way, let's get going. Torch Hollows are going to be one of the main enemies you encounter here, and they are not to be trifled with. Have your shield up, or they will kill you fast in the early game because of the weird frenzy panic running attack thing they do. There's also a butcher mini-boss down here that's waiting for you, and his cleaver does some heavy damage, but his hook is also able to pierce through your shield. After the butcher is dead, though, you can open up the chest to find yourself a large ember, which will allow you to upgrade your weapons to +10, and if you work your way down a bit further, you'll encounter a man known as Laurentius. He's the pyromancy teacher of the game, so free him. And yeah, you'll want that for a bit later on in the game, because pyromancy is generally the go-to magic for non-magic users, though in this run through I'm not really using anything other than the basic heal spell. But I should warn you to be careful, because there is a second butcher nearby, and this one, if you don't know it's there, it does have a decent chance of sneaking up on you. Now, if you have the Master Key in hand, you can, well, assuming you don't get attacked by the slime monsters, you can fairly easily access the bonfire here, and I'd say make good use of it because it's the only one down here. In fact, it might be worth considering kindling the thing, but that's up to you. For the most part, the depths is actually pretty easy to navigate as long as you don't fall down to the pits and the levels below. If you do, then you can pretty easily get turned around, and that's when it becomes confusing. Now, there is one channeler in this dungeon that you're going to come across on the main path, and I'm going to tell you this: make absolutely certain you kill this guy. While other channelers can be kind of annoying with who they buff, this one will buff up the boss as well as fire soul arrows during the fight. If the boss is buffed up, he is pretty much guaranteed to one-shot you even if you were something in like level 80. Okay, maybe not quite that much, but it increases his damage drastically, and this boss already hits like a truck. And with the channeler dead, it's not too long until you come across the second mini-boss of this dungeon.
I'm the giant rat that makes all of the rules. Let's see what kind of trouble we can get ourselves into.
Thankfully, after the rat's down, you're almost done with the depths, so I'll say you're going to see a slide. Make sure you hug the left side before you go down. See where the water's falling, and stay to the left. If you do so, you'll be able to skip right to the end of the place, and if not, well, the fall won't kill you, but with what's down there, you'll wish it did. Now, I would highly recommend you set up this shortcut, because this will take you back to right outside where your bonfire is, and while I wouldn't say the boss of this area is hard, he does hit he's very strong. There's also a strange merchant down here who sells a bunch of weird and out there items such as the crystal weapons. Do I recommend using them? Well, okay, they're not terrible weapons. They do hit very hard, but they're extremely fragile, and when they break, they can't be repaired like other weapons can. They are one and dones that after you use, they're gone. I should also mention that if you're playing in human form, you can summon Solaire for this boss fight, but due to how bulky this boss is and the way that summoning NPCs gives the bosses more HP, I would actually recommend against doing that, because you're going to end up making the fight harder on yourself, since this is not a boss that's really designed for 2 players. The Gaping Dragon is absolutely massive, probably the most imposing fight in the game because even though it's not the largest boss, it's one of the largest ones that's actively moving around and coming after you, while most of the other large ones are stationary. This boss also has far more health than anything you've faced so far, and even bosses afterwards, because to give an example, the Taurus Demon has 1400 HP, the Asylum Demon has 800 HP, Capra has 1200, I believe? Yeah, Gaping Dragon has over 4,400 HP. In fact, it's 4,401 if we're being precise. I don't know why the +1 was always funny to me. Anyways, as far as this boss goes, there's a few things you can keep in mind. First off, if you cut off his tail, you'll get the Dragon King Great Axe, which is essentially the funny man weapon of the game. It's not amazing, but if you have the stats for it, it is very powerful, and you can use it for some hilarious shenanigans later on. Otherwise, this is a boss that I enjoy, but I can see why it can be frustrating for some people, because the fact that he has so much HP and he's so bulky. But let me give you a recommendation. Don't try to run away. Don't play it safe. Fight the boss head on. If you do, this boss is going to spend a lot more time going for his slam attacks and leaving his head exposed for you to attack. Now, when his head's exposed, that means he's giving you a chance before he goes for his big charge, and his head takes double damage, sort of like Dark Eater Midir from Dark Souls 3, actually. If you do that, then, well, the fight actually doesn't last that long, and it ends up being one of my favorite. In fact, I would consider this my favorite boss in the base game of Dark Souls 1. Though there is a DLC boss fight I like more, and I'll admit, it's a hot take, but hey, I love this fight. I'm not afraid to admit it. Also, you get 25,000 souls for beating him, and that's awesome. Now, Blighttown can be a fairly difficult place, so it's time to make some preparations. If you haven't already, go see Andre, give him the Large Ember, and get your weapon upgraded past +5. After that, jump off the elevator and take this route here, because you'll want to go first onto the roof over here. That's going to be needed for the area that we're going to. The Undead Asylum Floor 2 key. Yep, you know where we're going at this point. And after you've gotten the Floor 2 key, take the elevator and do it again. This time going all the way up the stairs until you see the bird nest where you'll want to curl into a ball. You have to wait for an awkwardly long time, not gonna lie. Now, the most important things to get here are what's behind this door. It will lead you to another ring known as the Rusted Iron Ring, which seems useless because well, all it does is let you move at normal speed in water, but that also means swamp-like environments, and yeah, we're going to be dealing with some of that later. Now, if you go back to where your cell is, the large thumping sound is still going on, but we have a Black Knight to kill, so yeah, fight him and get to killing. Though you're in a more compact arena, so circle strafing for backstabs is probably not going to work. You may have to actually play a bit more carefully here. Now, if you head into your cell, you'll find a strange item known as the Peculiar Doll, which you're going to need to access a secret level a little bit later in the game. It doesn't serve any purpose other than that, but I want to at least show this secret level off, because it's pretty cool. And lastly, there is another Black Knight that's outside where you originally got your weapon. Though, I find this one to be weaker than the one near your cell. It's probably placebo effect, but it always seems like this one has less HP to me. Well, that's pretty much everything to do and see here, so I guess we should go ahead and leave and... alright. That thing. Yeah, say hello to the next boss. Oh boy, what is there to say? Well, the Stray Demon is certainly one of the video game bosses of all time. Okay, I don't hate this fight, because while it is a reskin, at least he does have some new magic explosion moves, even if they're not the best telegraphed. And you could see him at the start of the game, so it feels less like a shameless reskin, and a little bit more, to me anyways, like a neat bonus for those of you that were paying attention. That being said, this is not exactly a super fun battle, more just a neat sideshow with a actually fairly worthwhile reward for winning, as beating him will net you an item known as the Titanite Slab, which allows you to get your weapons to plus 15. That being said, this boss is so bulky, you just about need to have a plus 15 weapon to kill him anytime soon, so if you have a Black Knight weapon of some sort, I would recommend equipping it for this battle, because Black Knight weapons do additional damage against demons. If we head below Firelink Shrine, you're going to come across a door that normally can't be opened unless you have the Master Key, or a key that you're not supposed to get until the end of Blighttown, but yeah. In which case, you're effectively taking the back entrance into Blighttown to save yourself some sanity, and also save yourself a lot of time, because there is no reason to take the entrance to Blighttown from the depths unless it's for personal challenge. On the way down, you're gonna come across some annoying asshats that shoot toxic darts at you, and they build up at a really fast rate. It's pretty much guaranteed to proc. So, I would say bring at least one blooming purple moss clump if you can, especially since these projectiles make no noise and they can sneak up on you, but thankfully, the toxic dart blowers do not respawn when they die, but they also don't fade away either, which leads me to believe that they might not be undead like other enemies in the game are, and we're just killing people. I don't know. Something to think about. Now, on your way down, you're going to want to make sure you come into this sewer-looking area that has some fire-breathing dog enemies. Why on earth would you want to be here? Well, because this place gives you your third Firekeeper soul. I should warn you, however, that collecting this one triggers a bit of a key event that we won't see yet, but once we get done with this place and get back up, you'll see it. Now, that being said, Blighttown is an area I used to hate, but looking back and thinking back on it, that's probably more due to technical issues, because it's actually not a bad level at all. It's got some good vertical design, and while the atmosphere looks disgusting, it's intentional. It's not supposed to be a very welcoming place at this point. Though there are a few questionable places with slope detection, so I'd advise staying off of any tree branches unless you absolutely have to be on there, because that can lead you to gravity deaths. And yeah, we don't want gravity deaths, yes? In fact, here's an example of the slope detection. Would you believe me if I told you I meant to do that? Well, I'd be lying, but it does serve a purpose, because the fire went out. Yeah, picking up that third Firekeeper soul, Lautrec is gone, and Anastasia's dead. We also have a black eye orb that's designed to hunt down the murderer. It doesn't take a detective to piece 2 and 2 together, so keep this in mind. We'll be tackling it a little bit later into this game. Probably later than I should have tackled it, but oh well. Once you make your way to the bottom, we have the obligatory poison swamp that's in every modern From Software game. So, thankfully there's a bonfire down here, so grab it, you're gonna need it. Now, the swamp is actually a fairly interesting area, despite what you may think. If you look to your right, you're gonna see what looks almost like a giant termite mound, and that's the way to go for progress. But if you instead choose to look to your left, well, first off, you have these mosquito enemies that infinitely respawn no matter how many times you kill them, which is annoying. Yeah, see, it popped up like that. Anyways, though, if you look to your left, there's a giant tree that holds absolutely nothing of value and nothing of importance whatsoever. But the enemies around it are these little slug guys that, well, while they don't give a lot of souls, they have an increased chance of dropping large titanite shards, and that's really good if you're trying to get your weapon to plus 10, so I'd recommend, if you have the time, stick around and farm them for a bit, especially if you have the rusted iron ring and you can move through the swamp at full speed. I should also mention the swamp has an NPC invader called Maneater Mildred, and if you take her out, then come here in human form, you can actually summon her to assist you in this boss fight. Is it helpful? It can be. My biggest warning though is don't bring fire to this battle or you'll regret it. So, Quelaag is a Chaos Witch. What exactly does that mean? Well, she's one of the Daughters of Chaos, or the daughter of the Witch of Izalith, that was mentioned in the game's opening. Despite the ominous music, this is actually a much faster paced boss fight than any other up to this point in the game, and honestly one of the fastest paced in the main game. So it pays to be on top of your game, with dodging her fire attacks and sword swipes. It might be preferable to just blocking. Interestingly, her spider half is considered a demon, so hitting it with Black Knight weapons should do extra damage. Meanwhile, her human half doesn't have this weakness, but for obvious reasons that's irrelevant information. What is relevant, however, if you shoot the human half of her body with an arrow, you'll be guaranteed to stun her. This works every single time from what I've tested, so it's entirely possible you could stunlock her with a bow and arrow, which is funny to think about. Overall, I would say Quelaag is a great boss, and probably the toughest one in the first half of the game, and by most accounts, probably the best made one, though I'll admit, I definitely have my preference for the Gaping Dragon as a boss fight. But hey, that's neither here nor there. It's a great fight, it's one I enjoy, and I think it holds up well even to this day. Though it would probably benefit from a bit faster paced action like Dark Souls 3, that just kinda makes the fight stand out in this game. When Quelaag goes down, she'll end up giving you a boss soul, the second one in the game and the first required one. Though, this boss soul I can never truly bring myself to use for one major reason. But before any story stuff, make sure you ring the second bell so you can actually progress. Do not walk out of here like an idiot. Now, you may think that you're going to have to walk yourself all the way out, but if you go down to the bottom floor of this little place and hit this illusory wall, there's a weird egg guy that's going to be blocking your way. But he's not an enemy, and he's not even an obstacle. In fact, if you talk to him, Say hello to Quaylin, one of the other Daughters of Chaos, and this one's actually a Firekeeper. In fact, she's the fair lady, and, well, she's a lot nicer than Quelaag is. You can try talking to her, but unless you have a very specific item equipped, you won't be able to hear her voice, which is somewhat ironic when you think about the fact that she's one of the only 2 characters in the game that has proper talking animations. Good job, FromSoft. Anyways. Now, as far as Covenants go, I haven't talked about them too much, but I will say the Chaos Covenant is my go-to for basically every playthrough for a couple of reasons. I like the pyromancy that you learn from it, I like Quaylan's character, and just the fact that when you do this Covenant, you're just helping her get better so she doesn't feel as sick. And, well, most people may know this Covenant is tied to unlocking a shortcut through one of the in-game dungeons, and widely considered the worst of the in-game dungeons, and it's generally the only way you're supposed to be able to save a certain NPC from dying, though there is a glitch that you can exploit to save the NPC without the shortcut, and I will be showing that off, but I'll also be showing off what you're actually supposed to do. Either way, I've been saving my humanity up to this point, so this is kind of my reason for getting it. Because I don't really do a lot of online play in this game, so for me the humanity is a good resource I can use to either kindle bonfires or boost my rank with this Covenant. That's about it. Thankfully, the remaster allows you to use multiple humanity at once as well as give her multiple humanity at once, because in the original you had to do it one at a time. Now, at this point, you have done everything you need to do down here for now, so you're more than free to head back up to Firelink Shrine and progress the game, but there's one more place we can explore down here. We're not supposed to be here yet. The only major thing here is a fog gate you can enter, and you'll see a giant monster that does nothing. At least until you choose to provoke him, in which case it's a boss fight where you just dodge his slams and attack his hand. It's very boring and not a lot of fun if we're being entirely honest, and he's scaled for late game, so he'll pretty much kill you in 1 if not 2 hits. Alternatively, you can loot the corpse in the arena, and yeah, you just grave robbed his sister, and he's not very happy about that. Not to worry, because there's another way to beat this boss. If you decide to run to the end of the arena after you've grave robbed his sister, he'll chase you all the way to the fog gate, and eventually he's going to jump and leave himself suspended over the ledge. Now at this point, you can just keep attacking his arms until he gets sent into the abyss below. It's not exactly a super engaging fight, nor is it an extremely hard fight, but I can at least appreciate them trying something different, and while I don't love this boss fight, it's not a terrible gimmick boss and it doesn't actually make the game worse. As far as taking out Ceaseless Discharge, well, that will cool the lava in the area, allowing you to explore the demon ruins below, but there's nothing else you can really do here right now, and there's honestly not too much of value down here anyways. But if you really hate yourself, you can go and fight the 7 forest demons. Anyways, once you've had your fill of running around and doing random stuff, if you want to make progress, you have to go to Sin's Fortress, which, in case you forgot, is located right next to Andre and the Undead Parish bonfire. Now, Sin's Fortress is a location filled with tricks and traps to keep you on your toes, and part of me doesn't want to spoil all the tricks this place has up its sleeve, but there's still some that are dangerous and devious enough I feel I should mention them. Now, once you first get in, if you jump into the pit below, you can take the ladder up, and behind a secret wall, there's actually yet another ladder. Where does this lead? Well, to an optional mini-boss fight against the giant that lived at the gate. It doesn't serve any major purpose, and honestly, you're actually kind of a jackass for killing the guy who helped you get in here. But otherwise, the tar pit sucks, and you really don't want to stay down there any longer than you absolutely have to. which, if you don't fall, should be a grand total of 0 seconds. Now, after you make your way across the bridge and avoid all the various swinging pendulums and arrow traps, you'll see a man-serpent that's sleeping down below. You're meant to use a boulder and break this wall down and kill him with that, but due to some, I guess, spaghetti code in this game, if you deflect his strong attacks, there's a chance that the wall will break behind him, and I'd recommend doing that because it's a good way to save time, and you can save one of the NPCs known as Big Hat Logan. Hold on a second, I love this part. Gets me every time. Now, the boulder sequence of Sin's Fortress is what I would probably consider the most important part, at least if you're trying to make a build, because at the top of this ramp area, you're going to find the Ring of Steel Protection, which reduces physical damage taken. Meanwhile, once you get to the end of the boulder area, there's a pit that has a bottom, but as the boulders keep running down, if they eventually fill up, they'll break down the wall, allowing you to get the covetous Gold Serpent Ring, which drastically raises your item discovery rate. Both of these rings are excellent to pick up, and alone would make visiting this dungeon worthwhile if it wasn't already required. I just recommend snagging them every playthrough because they're great, unless you're doing like a super fast speedrun. Say hello to the first mimic in the game. Why does it make cow noises? After the mimic, Sin's Fortress is mostly just an elaborate spiral staircase with you dodging swinging pendulums and fighting man-serpents until you reach the roof. Once you reach the top of Sin's Fortress, Baldur Knights will make their second and final appearance in the game, though these ones have been scaled up a little bit, as this is now the mid-game area. They're still not that hard, assuming you have a moderately strong weapon. Otherwise, there's some neat little things to get here, such as the Flame Plate Ring, which gives you boosted defense against any and all fire attacks, which a fair number of in-game bosses will use, and even the final boss uses fire, so yeah, it's worth picking up, I'd say. Now, you would think that once you reach the top, Sin's Fortress, the craziness is over, but no, because now you're getting firebombed, so do your best to stay alive and make sure to examine this broken wall area to find a bonfire. A surprising number of people I've met don't know this is here, so I feel I should point it out. Now, I would highly recommend killing the giant that throws firebombs here because this will make the next boss much easier and safer, as well as making any future run-ups safer as well, because this giant does not respawn. There's also an NPC that you can summon for this boss fight, and this one is special. The Iron Golem is a massive foe that can throw you off of the arena if you get careless or really unlucky, but otherwise he's your garden variety giant boss ankle hacking simulator that, to be fair, hadn't been done to death yet at this point in the series. Though this fight is made super easy because of his stagger mechanic. After taking some damage, he'll start to wobble, and at that point he can't really do anything other than just hang there trying to regain his balance. If you keep hitting him, he will fall backwards, and if he's close enough to the edge, he'll fall off the arena to his death, and even if he doesn't fall, you still have plenty of time to wail on him. But be warned, his grabby hand can be glitchy, and while Tarkus is more than capable of soloing this boss fight on his own, he can also be erased from existence. Overall, I do enjoy this fight a good bit, but I was very surprised on my first playthrough by how easy it was, considering this is supposed to be the trial to see if you're worthy of the majesty of Anor Londo, and up to this point it was presumed that Anor Londo would also be near the end of the game, possibly. And speaking of the majesty of Anor Londo, Welcome everyone to Anorlando and all of its majesty. For a while, this was considered by many to be the best area in the entire From Software series. Nowadays, it doesn't quite reach that point, and I personally prefer an area later in this game, but it's still a fantastic level, and it's so large that it connects to multiple other areas on top of it. Now, you'll notice when you get here, the night enemies are absolutely massive, but interestingly, they don't attack you unless you get super close to them. I guess they're not really here to kill you, they're almost like set dressing for now, until they become enemies later. Thankfully, the game will cut you a break because you'll almost immediately be given a bonfire that's already lit, because we have ourselves a firekeeper here, and with Fanastasia's dead and you didn't find the fair lady, this is where I would say it's time to upgrade your Estus Flask to +2 or +3. Interestingly, the gargoyles also make a reappearance here, but this time as a lightning version and as a mini-boss. Now, if you're a little bit observant, you can see that, hey, there's a place we can go off to on the side, and that will lead us to a giant room with these KKK looking asshats. Anyways, these guys are known as the Painting Guardians. They have low defense and basically non-existent poise, but they can hit quite hard and love to spam throwing knives. Plus, their movement is somewhat like an NPC's. Hilariously, though, they don't have very good pathfinding, so there will be more than one occasion where you see them attack themselves off the edge, falling to their deaths. Not only is this place grand in appearance, it's also grand in setting up shortcuts. Seriously, they created an entire cutscene just for lowering a bridge. And if you check the stairs where you entered after the bridge has been lowered, you can actually go down into the cathedral area yourself, and you can find the armor set belonging to Tarkus, meaning he died to the ultimate enemy in any Dark Souls game, gravity. Also, if you decide to go and check the painting with a peculiar doll in hand, well, you get something special. Welcome to the Painted World of Aramis, and one of the secret levels in this game. Also, the only major one I really want to show in this video. Now, Aramis is actually the very first level that From Software developed for Dark Souls 1, and that's a major reason why it's so disconnected from the rest of the world when it's otherwise such an interconnected game. This was their testing ground for how everything is supposed to work, and you can kind of see that because the level design is a bit more in line with what you'd see in something like Demon's Souls, where it's based around one checkpoint, and while I'm by no means the largest fan of that game, I can appreciate the idea of having your test level act as a secret level. It's better than letting it all go to waste and, just being completely unused. That being said, we're not going to be spending too long here or scour everything. There's plenty of secrets to find here, and you'll have to find some of them for yourself. Now, something I actually do really like about this game is that there are quite a few unique enemies in this location, and even the ones that aren't, outside of the hollows, they'll only appear in like one other spot. That being said, while I appreciate the fact that they have unique enemies to go with a secret level, I'm not as fond of the fact that basically none of them are that fun to fight. You have the flesh sacks, which just poison you. You have the phalanx enemies, which just hide behind their shells constantly. And then you have the Ornifex birds, which, well, oh boy, there sure are something. Oh, and they even put enemies known as bone wheels down here, which, thankfully, unless you're going for every little secret, you won't encounter, but whoever decided to put bone wheels in a room the size of a shoebox, you're very mean and I hope you have a bad day. I will say though, the Undead Dragon mini-boss fight has an amazing introduction, probably the most memorable part of this entire area. Now, as far as being a mini-boss, the Undead Dragon is actually pretty alright. It's a stationary foe, and you're going to be attacking the arms and the head, but it's not a terrible idea from a design standpoint, and From Software thought so too, considering that the Dark Souls 3 DLC had a mini-boss fight with a dragon on a bridge that you had to knock off in order to access the DLC's secret boss. Now, that being said, while the fight is okay, there's a very weird glitch associated with this dragon after you take it out. And it's just very bizarre. Words can't describe it, so I'll just show it off. Now, the boss isn't really anything too special. Priscilla will just go invisible, and then you have to find her and hit her a few times to make her visible, and that's about it. What's more interesting is both the fact that you can, instead of fighting her, just choose to talk to her, and she'll let you leave peacefully, and at least earlier in development, she was meant to play a much larger role, probably something similar to the Firekeeper from Dark Souls 3 or the Emerald Herald from Dark Souls 2. That would be my guess anyways. Now, back in Anor Londo, on the other side of the bridge, the final gargoyle awaits you, and if you haven't already gotten his halberd, it's guaranteed to drop here, and it's one of the best weapons in the game. I recommend giving it a try if you haven't. And the game also introduces a new enemy type with quite the introduction. Once that nightmare is finally over, make sure you enter the door on the left as soon as possible. That's where the next bonfire is, and Solaire's here to offer reprieve.
Oh, there you are. You've been quiet these days. Smooth summoning out there. Anytime you see my brilliantly shining signature, do not hesitate to call upon me. You've left me with quite an impression. I would relish a chance to assist you. You really are fond of chatting with me, aren't you? If I didn't know better, I'd think you have feelings for me. Oh no, dear me, pretend you didn't hear that.
Now, if you jump over the stair railing at the right angle, you can actually skip a vast majority of Anor Londo, and I actually recommend doing that if you're trying to run back to the boss, because otherwise it can be long. As far as exploring goes, there actually is a good amount of stuff to pick up here, such as the first floor containing a fireplace with a secret illusory wall. It takes you down into a dark and mysterious room, and what's down there? Well, the best armor in the entire game, as well as a mimic, so watch the chains if you want to be careful. Otherwise, once you've entered the main building of Anor Londo, you're going to be going up and down these 3 floors and the roof throughout this place. You'll be opening different doors to access shortcuts, and there's even a side quest here, where you help out Sigurd by killing the Silver Knights and getting a secret series of doors open, and he'll reward you with the Tiny Beings Ring, which increases your health a little bit. Not useful, but a nice reward. Then at the end of the Grand Hall, there's the Giant Blacksmith, and this man is how you get your boss weapons. For those of you who've been wanting your Quaelix Fury Sword, or, say, the Life Hunt Scythe, here you go. Put it on, go crazy, have fun. Then we enter this place where the black eye orb starts quivering, meaning Lordship is nearby. We'll take care of that in a little while. Okay, so I'm editing over this last bit in post because for some reason in the video I made this absolutely brain-dead decision to kill not only the next boss, but 6 more bosses after it, including 2 of the major Great Soul or Lord Soul bosses, before even handling the Black Eye Orb, and you need to get this done to get Anastasia back. So after we take out the main boss of this area, I'm going to do a little bit of footage splicing, and if my stats look inconsistent, that's why. And for this next boss, you can summon Solaire to help you out once again, and hey, you know what, why not? It's a multi-boss anyways. Bring it up, friend. Here we are at the boss fight, considered one of the best in the game, and one of the best in the series, and yeah, it's good. Don't get me wrong, I like this fight, but it's probably only my 4th or 5th favorite battle in this game, and even when just counting the base game, I still prefer the Gaping Dragon. I know, I'm weird, whatever. It's your soul and fast gank with the pillars to break up aggro, and you can choose the phase 2 of the fight, which is awesome. But it doesn't pan out quite as well as you'd hope, because Ornstein has next to no health in this fight. It's like he's not even really here. Anyways, Smo, on the other hand, is bulky as hell, and that's fine, but trying to do Ornstein last is just going to make this boss fight much harder on yourself, especially with the glitchy-ass momentum-storing charge attack Ornstein has. 19 out of 20 times, you're gonna kill Ornstein first, and have Smo in phase 2, where he gains the superpowers of electricity, but at this point, Smo sadly is just a slightly scarier demon boss that we've fought multiple times already. Still, it can be a fun challenge, the music is awesome, and hey, God help you if you don't know about the stair skip. Overall, I would say it's a great boss that went on to inspire many others, for better or for worse. For better in the Demon Princess case at least. And for the victory, well, the reward is quite good. You know, though, I noticed that there's a statue missing from this trio. I wonder who that could be. And your reward for victory against Ornstein and Smo is the amazing chest ahead. Oh, and I guess you unlock fast travel as well. That's pretty cool. But you know, something about this feels off. I'm sure it's fine. Okay, so I'm splicing this one in a bit later because I didn't do this for some reason until after I had already taken out 2 different Lord Soul bosses and one of the DLC bosses, when no, you should do this now, especially in the remastered version, you can take them. Lordship is a standard NPC fight, but with a few gimmicks up his sleeve. For one, he has 2 Chuckle Fucks helping him in battle, and for 2, he's immune to fall damage. On top of that, his Show's Help will pierce through your shields, but this fight is made a lot easier in the remaster because you can bring a bit of Estus with you into battle instead of having none. It's not hard, and honestly, Lordship will go down after a bit of punishment. So, I should also mention, taking out Lordship gets you not only 5 humanity, which is useful for the Chaos Covenant and setting up a shortcut later in the game, but also it will get you something known as the Ring of Favor and Protection. Now, I will say this. The Ring of Favor and Protection is a strange one. It provides a boost to your health, stamina, and equipment load, with a big drawback being you can never take it off. On one hand, it's so good you'd never really want to take it off, but on the other hand, once you equip it, ring experimentation is basically gone because you'll pretty much always be using the Ring of Favor and Protection, and then either Havel's Ring or the Wolf Ring, completely ignoring everything else. It's a great ring, but not one I wanted to use this playthrough, so I didn't. Then I have one last warning to give, and that is, do not, under any circumstance, use the Firekeeper soul you get from Lautrec. Otherwise, Anastasia will remain dead for the rest of the game, and you'll never be able to rest at the Firelink Shrine bonfire. I fucked this up badly on my first playthrough. With the Lord Vessel in tow, I recommend heading back to Firelink Shrine and setting it down here in order to remove the 3 golden fog gates so you can progress the game, as well as access some other additional content. There is an alternative place you can set the Lord Vessel if you really hate Frampt, but it requires doing a pretty tough dungeon at this point in the game, and I hate the character associated with it. He's just an edgelord, so we're setting it here.
Very well. As king to achieve commence, Scath brave the 4 kings of Nipan fall. Are you ready then?
Also, something hilarious is that if you try to sell Smo's soul to Frampt, he's only going to offer you a value of 1 soul for it. Meanwhile, if you were to just consume the soul, you would get, I believe, 10,000? Yeah, Frampt hates this guy. It's kind of funny. He finds piles of shit 200 times more valuable than Smo's soul. After you place the Lord Vessel, there's a few more steps to unlocking the DLC. First, you're going to need to go to Darkroot Basin and kill the Hydra. Then you need to quit the game and restart it, and now, in place of where the Hydra is, there will be a golden golem in the back of the Darkroot Basin. Take it out, and make sure to speak with the NPC associated with it. Return to Anne Orlando, as that's how you reach the Duke's Archives, and enter the Duke's Archives trying not to get taken out by a boar. Kill the large crystal golem here at the start of the Duke's Archives in order to find an item known as the Broken Pendant. Get yourself eaten by a mimic because you need some extra footage. Okay, yeah, you can actually probably skip this step. Then head back to where you fought the Golden Golem in Darkroot Basin and touch the mysterious portal. Now, rest of the bonfire, and then as soon as you start the DLC, you're going to be thrown into a boss fight against the Sanctuary Guardian. The Sanctuary Guardian is much faster than pretty much anything else you'll see in the main game, and with his ability to fly around and shoot lightning, he can be quite the troublesome foe. Thankfully, this boss has very low HP for one set in the second half of the game, so a handful of hits can take him down. In fact, an upgraded Great Scythe can pretty much 4-hit him. But it's a boss where you either win quick or die quicker. And the lightning spread over... Well, the lightning spreads out if it hits the water, as it would, and it certainly doesn't help your chances of survival. But this boss does have something really cool with, A, he has a tail cut, where you can receive the Poison Whip. It's not exactly useful, but I'm glad they added it in there. And B, it's his melee combos, and I actually really like this. You see, he can do either a 2-hit combo or a 4-hit combo with his attacks. And you'll know what it is by the second attack in the combo. If he goes for a claw swipe followed by a bite/head bash, then you know he's going to follow up with another head bash or another claw swipe, whichever one he did second, and it'll be a full 4-hit combo. Now, if he does a claw swipe followed by another claw swipe, he's done, and the same goes for if he does a bite followed by another bite. It's a cool detail that I really wish more bosses had, where it's a subtle thing, but it's something that you'll notice of, oh yeah, it's free to go now. Otherwise, after a little bit of punishment, the Sanctuary Guardian goes down, and you've taken out your first DLC boss.
Look at this. From what faraway age hast thou come? Thy scent is very human indeed, but not intolerable. Ah, Princess Dusk's savior. Thine aura is precisely as she described. I thank thee deeply for rescuing Her Highness, but Princess Dusk is here no longer, snatched away by that horrifying primeval human. And so I must ask, couldst thou once more play the savior? Thank you. I am Elizabeth, guardian of this sanctuary. Something of a godmother to Princess Dusk. I shall assist thee to my utmost, for I am one with the sorcerers of Urasil.
When they said the mushrooms were talking to me, I don't think this is what they meant. While you're here, I'm also going to recommend rushing through the first area of the DLC, the Royal Woods, to access both a good checkpoint and a merchant later on. Hi, Calamite. Bye, Calamite.
Let me guess. Snatched by a shadowy wind and dragged off to the palace. Yes, of course. Exactly what happened to me. We are both strangers in this strange land. But at least now there are two of us.
This little bottle of sunshine is known as Marvelous Chester. He also got isekai'd here with you, and more importantly, he is a merchant that sells a couple of interesting items, as well as being a reliable place to buy humanity at a somewhat marked up price. A good way to top off for the Chaos Covenant. Yep, we're doing this for a third time. It's just a crappy reskin of the Stray Demon, but at least Stray Demon had some minor level of build-up, and what's a potentially cool secret to come across if you were paying attention. This is nothing. I'd say this might actually be my least favorite boss in the game, with only one other fight potentially beating it out. Well, two other fights beating it out, and no, it's not who you think it is. Trust me, her fight sucks too, but I don't completely hate it, or at least I don't hate the idea of it. Anyways, yeah, this fight's just lazy, and you can tell this is... Asylum is the area where the developers very clearly ran out of time. It's bad. I don't like it. Honestly, if I wasn't getting the footage for the video, I would probably skip it. You may be surprised to hear that if you're taking the main path, I say with a massive air quotes, then there's really no time at all before the next boss fight. But I will warn you, this is the hard cutoff point to save the NPC. So if you haven't gone and killed the Sunlight Maggot and you actually want to save them, do it now. Okay, I'm gonna admit it, this boss fight actually does look really cool. Unfortunately, this fight is kind of a clusterfuck. I'd recommend cutting off the limbs in order to get the orange charred ring early, because normally you have to kill the boss to get it, but if you cut off the limbs you get it now. That being said, when you cut the limbs off, they come to life and start attacking you, which is kind of a neat gimmick, I guess? Really though, unless you're doing a no-death run, the best way to handle this boss is to just try to get the limb cuts and take the death. It's a mess, but I surprisingly don't actually hate this boss fight. But you know, maybe we can summon a friend to make this fight a little bit easier. I wonder who. Oh, hey Solaire. As weird as this boss is, if you actually equip the orange shard ring, it's not terrible. You have a lot more room to run around in, and I think this boss could have been good if they just let the ring be accessible right outside the boss fight, instead of it being either locked behind a really weird limb cut or killing the boss. Because without it, you're pretty much just stuck confined to an island and either have to take a death or, well, do something really weird and not what you'd expect. Alternatively, if you have the ring, then yeah, there's plenty of room to move around, and it's not a perfect fight, but it's okay. As I said, I don't hate this boss. There is at least some potential I see here, and while the design is chaotic, it does actually look pretty cool, and I like that you could see him before the battle, if you were observant. I think if either the ring was accessible before you came into this arena, or if this arena wasn't 90% lava, or if the boss just didn't spin forever taking pot shots at you while you had to wait for him to come to you, this could have been a good boss fight, but it just has everything in the wrong place, and that causes it to be one of the less enjoyable fights in the game.
What? What? After all this searching, I still can't find it.
Now, welcome to Lost Izalith proper. It's bad. You're just running through lava and dealing with dragon asses, and nobody likes this place. It sucks, it's lazily designed, and there's nothing even here worth getting. So, yeah, we got to rank 2 of the Chaos Covenant, we're taking the back route.
Was it all a lie? Have I done this all for nothing? Oh, my dear son. What now? What should I do? My son. My dear, dear son.
If you take the back entrance, you really do just skip like 80% of this place, and unfortunately that is the preferred way to play it because this level is not fun. Oh, and for good measure, the game decided to throw in one last poison zone, and unless you have the rusted iron ring on, you are slowed down to a crawl here. There's no reason to come down here unless you're trying to complete Sigmaier's questline, though. Now, right before we get to the main boss, there's actually an NPC that's here to fight you. It's another Daughter of Chaos, though this one I don't believe has a name. Either way, she's an extremely powerful pyromancer that is not to be trifled with, and all of her attacks have a lava after effect because they're Chaos Flame. I don't have too much else to say about it because, honestly, she's the epitome of a glass cannon. She can kill you in 1 or 2 shots, but she goes down in 2 hits as well. She has no HP, or poise, or defense. Alright, let's get it over with. We're gonna slide down this, well, slide, and welcome everyone to the Bed of Chaos. This awesome looking gigantic tree monster that's the new form of the Witch of Izalith. She can't move from her spot, but she'll attack you if you get close, and she seems invincible. This boss is widely considered to be the worst boss in the entire game. The way you're actually supposed to go about fighting this boss is to destroy the 2 branch shield twig generator things on the sides. Now, this is fine at first, but the sweeping arms can get really annoying and they're hard to dodge. Plus, the hitboxes on them are questionable, and while they don't do a lot of damage, they knock you very far back. Why is this a problem? Well, after she's lost her first shield generator branch thing, she's going to start spamming fire attacks, and the floor will start crumbling and leading you into instant death pits. That being said, this boss has a very weird weakness because it's the only boss where your progress is saved throughout the fight, even if you die. So, here's the thing. Don't try to make the full run. After you kill the boss, quit out. You'll spawn outside the arena and have half the run back. Now, I don't like this boss, and I could be more critical of it, but I do at least see what they were going for in trying to accomplish with a more gimmick-style battle, and overall, I think if the fight was less gravity-focused and maybe more bullet hell or something else, it could have worked. Some people don't like that the boss is also super easy once you make it to the end, as a single hit is able to kill the Witch of Izalith. But I don't know, I think the idea of it being more like a platformer boss where the objective is to get to the big weak spot and take it out, or I guess in this case a level boss, it's not terrible on paper, it's more a flawed execution. Again, by no means do I like this fight, but I wouldn't call it the worst I've dealt with in the game. There is one other that still functions on a mechanical level, and is just badly designed. Now, after you've one-punched the Witch of Izalith, everything in the lower area of Lordran is dead and out of the way, and we finally have our first of 4 Lord Souls. Now, with our first Lord Soul down, we go from the worst area into the game to my least favorite area in the game. I do not like this next part, so I'm going to give you my advice for what you should have if you want to make your journey a little less dangerous. You'll want your divine weapon, so you can kill the skeletons and they will not revive, because otherwise they'll revive, because fuck you. Oh, also skeletons can parry you. Forgot about that. You're going to want the heaviest armor you can equip, generally either the Havel armor, but Tarkus armor also works, and the Stone Soldier armor can work as well if you have it. Though Havel is probably the best one and you don't have to upgrade it. And lastly, you're going to want the Sunlight Maggot, even if you didn't take the back entrance through Lost Izalith, because of something that comes up in the end of the Bone Zone. Anyways, it's time for pain and suffering, my friends. Welcome to the Catacombs. The main goal of the catacombs is to make your way down to the bottom. Now, after you get the bridges set up, you can actually do some drops and make it fairly safely, but until then, you're going to have to take the annoying way down, while dealing with respawning skeletons, if you don't have a divine weapon, fire-shooting necromancers, and heads that like to blow themselves up. And once you get to the bottom, well, probably the game's most infamous enemy will make its appearance. Something mildly interesting is that one of the mausoleums has a Dark Moon Seance ring, which allows you to access a covenant, but it's a PvP focused one, and I have to ask, what the heck is something that involves Zen Orlando doing all the way down here in the Bone Zone? Otherwise, there's really not too much to say about this level. The enemies respawn, and that's the main gimmick, but until you reach the bottom, that's about it. There is a Black Knight with an axe chilling out down here, and yeah, I mean, if you're working your way down, be careful that you don't go splat from the fall damage. There is also a bonfire that got added near the bottom that's next to a blacksmith, but it's hidden, and I didn't find it in this playthrough. There's also the ultimate weapon known as the Great Scythe, but Great Scythe is cringe. Okay, it's actually not. It's the strongest weapon in the game by far, but I don't like to use it because it just feels cheap, and it turns the game into a joke. Now, with the heavy armor, it may be overkill for most of the catacombs, but I do recommend it for the very bottom, because now you're in the bone pit, and this is where the bone wheels show up. These guys will come and try to wreck your life. They don't do a ton of damage, but they do it constantly. And if you don't have high enough poise, you will get shredded. Even if you do have high poison defense, you can still get chipped down if you're not careful. So make a mad dash to the boss fog, and then heal, because thankfully you're not forced into a boss fight the second you enter, though you probably wouldn't need to be too worried about this next boss anyways. Well, that was easy. Everyone, welcome to hell. I really hope you snagged the Sunlight Maggot from Lost Izalith, or some kind of light emitting spell. Maybe got lucky getting the lantern from one of the necromancers, because this place is a death trap. And not only are there pits everywhere, but giant skeletons of varying forms that are more than ready to wreck your life. And this place is even the slip and slide fun land, for some reason. Do whatever you can to reach the bonfire below so you can afford to retry, and once you get there, kindle the shit out of it. You now have something known as the Rite of Kindling, so you can carry up to 20 Estus flasks. With that, you don't have to worry about running out of health. Or at the very least, you won't die due to lack of resources. You'll die due to getting overwhelmed and killed. Oh, and there's also skeleton archers here because of course there are. Thanks, game. Patches will also make his appearance here, and yeah, he's an asshole. I mean, you could have ran into him in the catacombs, and there's actually quite a bit you could have done in the catacombs with Patches and Lautrec, but why would you go there early? It's not worth it. It's not worth your time. Just let Patches kick you into the pit, because that way you won't actually take any fall damage. Now, down in this pit, you'll actually run into Rhea, who we met back at the beginning of the game, and she mentions that the two red shirts were in fact red shirts. They were turned into hollows and we need to take them out. Of course, you can't see where they are from here, so it's a little spooky having enemies just kind of come out of nowhere, but hey, that's the Tomb of the Giants, and that's one thing I will give a little bit of credit for. You could have actually come here much earlier in the game, because most of the Tomb of the Giants is accessible, but why on earth would you? You're just going to make your life much harder for yourself if you do. Plus, for some reason, while Vince is able to do somewhat decent damage, Nico does nothing. I don't quite understand why. His damage is trash. After you've taken them out, talk to Rhea again and she'll be safe, and we'll check up on her after we're done with this hellhole. Then, right next to the bonfire, if you don't go to where Patches is, you'll be introduced to the deadliest enemy in the entire game. The skeleton dogs. These things are fast, do a lot of damage, and they have basically no telegraph on their charge. If you're not geared up in the heaviest of armors, they can one-shot you, and you can't even see them without the sunlight maggot or some sort of light emitter. Then for kickers, you can go through a fog gate and immediately be attacked by a Black Knight with a halberd of all things. Though I will admit I did actually get lucky here because I was able to get the rare drop, and yeah, the Black Knight halberd is one of the strongest weapons in the entire game, and it's not even hard to upgrade. If you want an easy mode, use this weapon. In fact, I fully endorse it for a new playthrough. Now, if you get to the one part of the Tomb of the Giants that actually looks kind of nice, and you're in human form, you'll be invaded by a man named Paladin Leroy, who's carrying a giant turkey leg. Yeah, I don't really get it either, but this is one NPC you really want to take out for a couple of reasons. Oh, and be careful not to knock him off the cliff or you will permanently miss out on his items. Or at the very least, his dropped items. Just make a note of this guy because it is worth your time to take him out if you can. After Leroy, the Tomb of the Giants is mercifully a fairly straight line, though there is a very evil, diabolical skeleton that hides behind a corner waiting to kick you off the ledge. I don't know whether I should be angry at that or if I should laugh at it because it's hilarious. It's kind of both. And then you enter the weird bone pit cult sacrifice zone where you have a bunch of pinwheels and baby skeletons. I don't like this place, and if you're not careful you can get killed very quickly, so just don't die. Yeah. Oh, and also that add yet another boss to the regular enemy list, because Pinwheel's here. This boss is cool looking, but man is he not fun to fight. Okay, so first off, you lose half your HP just from dropping into the arena anyways, and Nito has an army of skeletons that will infinitely respawn even with divine weapons that come after you. You may think, okay, I'll chase him down. Well, that's a bad idea, because if you chase him down, then you're going to go to where the large skeleton enemies are, and things will become much harder. On top of that, anytime he screams, that's a beep whistle to tell you you're about to get a giant toxic blade shoved up your butt. Then there's his grab attack, which, okay, in all honesty, I don't know what it does. It doesn't really do much of anything, at least from what I've seen. Though, there is one thing that I guess makes this fight a little bit easier than it could have been, and that is, well, let's just say friendly fire is turned on for the enemies, because Nito will just as happily kill the skeletons as he will you, though they'll come back to life, so I'm guessing he's not that concerned about it. Then something else I don't really like about this fight is Nito's a Covenant leader, which is neat to be able to serve a Lord Soul, but he's a required boss as well. So, yeah, if you're trying to do anything with his covenant, you have to do it before you kill him, and killing him's required to progress the game. Thankfully, you don't lose points with the covenant for killing him, so at least there was some thought put into it, but I don't know, I feel like maybe having a totem or something else you could have done would have made it a little bit better. I don't know. The biggest thing I will say is make sure you're in the heaviest armor you can and just keep wailing on Nito until he dies, because you don't want to die to this boss. If you do, well, I honestly think the run back to this boss is worse than the run back to the Bed of Chaos. Thankfully, you won't get killed quite as quickly as you will against Bed of Chaos, but it's not fun, guys. This fight is not fun. I hate it. This is my least favorite boss in the entire game. I hate it worse than the Bed of Chaos. He looks awesome, and his weapon is pretty damn awesome, but that's where the cool factor ends.
Damn, that stench. And I was really beginning to like it here. Maybe it's time I do something about it.
Feel their fates. Perhaps Petrus realized my weakness all along, and thus made the decision to abandon me. I can hardly blame him now.
Wait, have you met Petrus? That self-proclaimed cleric? Believe me on this one, bruv. The man is scum. Don't you be fooled by his claims to do good. They're all the same, those rotten clerics.
So yeah, anyways, it's time to kill Petrus.
No. This can't be. It can't end like this.
Okay, so there is actually a major gameplay benefit to killing Petrus, and it's not just because he's a jackass. It's because after you've saved Rhea, if you go too long, he's going to start murdering NPCs, her in particular. At the very least, I can say that the worst part of the game is behind us now. From here on, the remainder of this game, its levels and bosses, are either decent, at the very least, or possibly even good or great. Well, those last few bosses and areas were pretty bad, so let's have ourselves a palate cleanser. Knight Artorias. A boss without any bullshit or crazy gimmicks, no fancy bells or whistles, a straight one-on-one fight between you and the fallen hero. He does have a shake-up, where he'll try to buff himself with the power of the Abyss, but 2 good hits can stagger him out of the buff, or headshotting him with an arrow. Seriously, guys, use a bow, they work really well on some bosses. This is widely considered to be the best boss in the game, and I would probably agree. While there is one boss I prefer over it, this is still an S-tier boss fight, and probably top 15 best in the entire From Software catalog. Either way, there's not much else for me to say on this battle, so I think the footage can speak for itself. After Artorias is down, we finally get to reach Ulasil proper, the town taken by the Abyss, and apparently it's their own damn fault. I recommend kindling the ever-loving shit out of the bonfire, but beware running through here as a human. Not only is this place going to get you invaded by Chester, but this is the PvP hotspot of Dark Souls 1, and yeah, you don't want to be fighting a bunch of try-hard builds. You just don't, it's not fun. The Ulasil Township is a pretty interesting level, though the enemy types can get a little bit repetitive as you only really face two, and the main thing you'll need to find here are two items if you want to fight all the bosses. The first is guarded by a mimic, and that is the crest key needed to access the super boss, and the second is behind an invisible wall, but instead of hitting it, you're going to need some form of light source, and that's why I tackled the sunlight maggot and also did the Tomb of the Giants where you can get a skull lantern. The silver pendant is not required in order to face the last boss, but it will make your life a lot easier. Then, at the very end, you'll see a long hallway, and there's also an elevator you can take, which will take you back up to the top of the Ulasil Township because this place has fairly good level design. But after you've taken out some of the casters, it's time for a very bizarre mini-boss. It's this weird chained-up beast that has a horn coming out of it, or maybe a lance, and it's got a rock around it that it can use as a flail. I don't get it. It's very weird. It probably could have made for a boss fight if they really wanted to make it one, because there's only one of them in the entire game. It doesn't respawn after it's been killed, and it even has a unique drop. Granted, that unique drop is part of the chained armor set, which you can just buy from a starting merchant in the Undead Burg, but it's still something? I don't know. This boss is, as far as I can tell, almost completely, if not completely unexplained, and in some ways, that actually makes the fight a little bit creepier. I will never again be surprise attacked by this guy and killed. The Chasm of the Abyss is the final area of the DLC. It's actually not that hard to do, but the boss at the end is, at this point, too strong for us. The main thing we're here for is to set up some shortcuts and also save a certain NPC for some story content a bit later. Now, for the most part, the enemies here are going to be the same ones you found in the Ulasil Township, so the weird long-arm monkey dudes and the black mages. However, this place also has these super weird-looking humanity sprite creatures. Now, as far as farming humanity, these are the best enemies in the game to do it, because they have the highest drop rate. But they don't really do anything to attack you, they just sort of walk into you and you start taking damage, so they're definitely spooky enemies. But I wouldn't really call them that interesting. You'll know you're heading in the right direction when you either see a weird cat-looking thing, or the floor gives way beneath you, and then you see a weird cat-looking thing. At this point, you're just going to want to follow it, as she's guiding you to an invisible wall where, let's just say, a friend is hiding, and we want to save them. Remember this elevator, it'll be very important in a little bit. Actually, send it up now. After you find the secret room, you'll come across a swarm of the weird humanity sprites and a little dog or wolf trapped inside a protective circle. You save them, they'll howl to thank you, and leave behind the cleansing great shield. Now it's time to leave this place. Hey, want to see another example of how awesome this game's level design is? Yeah, we're right next to the bonfire in Ulasil.
Oh, you have quite some nerve. But are you just thick? Fine then. What is it that you need? Did you really slay Knight Artorias? I
I've heard the Abyss found it first, but even still, that's absolutely treacherous. Yes, magnificently so. Believe it or not, Lucille has brought the Abyss upon itself, fooled by that toothless set. They upturned the grave of primeval man, and at sight of his former rock, what could they have been thinking? A few lines or ancient history. You have to ask yourself, does it really matter? Well, you've quite the nerve. I've had enough of you.
Now, we've set up basically everything we need to do in the DLC, and we'll be good to go, but we're going to save that for the end of the game because the 2 remaining bosses are also the hardest fights in the game. Now, if you want to progress the story, it's time for us to head back to the Darkroot Garden and use the Crest of Artorias that you either got by buying it off of Andre or killing Andre, or you could take another route to get in if you killed the Hydra and did the ladder thing, but whatever. And welcome to the Darkroot Garden. Now, this area is weird because a lot of the enemies here are standard NPCs, except they aren't as smart and they respawn. The most notable one is probably Ferris, as she has the black bow and is able to snipe you from a long range. And the thief guy can be kind of a pain in the butt, but overall, they're not that hard by this point in the game. And if you access this place in the early game, this is actually one of the best places to farm experience and souls in general, because you can just lure them off the edge. I do have to give you a serious warning though, this place is home to the big PvP Covenant. This is, in fact, the PvP hotspot of the main game, and if you're online and human, you will be invaded. There's not really a question of if, it's a matter of it's just gonna happen. So, instead of taking the main route, let's take a slightly different path. Oh, hey, look, it's that kitty from earlier in the game. I wonder if it's friendly. And lastly, we stop and we get to see the Mushroom Man. The tiny ones mean you no harm, so leave them, but the giants? Yeah, they're not so friendly. Overall, there's not too much to say about this place, as it's more so just 2 battle arenas with a boss fight at the end. Though I guess what's interesting is that the Royal Wood and Darkroot Garden share the same level design, but with some slight differences, and, well, the main difference being that it's daytime in the Royal Wood while it's nighttime here in Darkroot. So, fun fact, you only actually get that extended cutscene if you did the DLC first, killed Artorias, and saved Sif from the Abyss. And that's why I tackled things in the very odd and specific order I did. Sif is overall a very basic boss, pretty much only using a few forms of sword slashes, and it's there more as an emotional fight that's backed up with some sad music. Though, as a fight, it's one of the most by the numbers in the game, because, well, really, all the boss does is swipe the sword a few times around. And that's it. It's never going to evolve, and in fact, Sif will actually grow weaker throughout the fight, as they begin to slow down, then limp, and fall over in the middle of their own combos. I and many other people don't want to fight or kill Sif, but unfortunately, you have to. There's no way to progress the game and survive in the Abyss unless you get the Covenant of Artorias, and there's no way to get the Covenant unless you kill Sif. So, my best thing I can say for this fight is make it quick. Oh no! He hollowed. The New Londo ruins are split into two major halves. The first half can be kind of annoying as you have the ghost enemies that will phase through walls and can only be hurt if you have either you've been cursed by the status effect or you have a transient curse active, which is like a temporary curse. And I don't know. It's not my favorite, but I do at least like the spooky atmosphere they have going on here. And the fact that the ghosts only really appear in the first half of the New Londo ruins really does add to the atmosphere. In fact, they're pretty much the only enemy here, for better or for worse. I think overall it's for better in this case, because they don't have a lot of HP, and they do a good job setting the mood. Now, you'll also see an NPC up here that's known as the Seal Keeper, and to reach him, you have to go through a horrible haunted house. Alternatively, you could just choose to shoot him with arrows until he dies, and it'll automatically drop the key into your inventory. The safer option is definitely to snipe him with your arrows, but if you do have the Lord Vessel, then you can just get the key peacefully, and you get a little bit of extra story beats. So I guess that means I'm doing the funhouse for the sake of this video. But if you're trying to go for the Dark Wraith Covenant, you will have to kill him, as this is the other location that you're able to set the Lord Vessel in.
Well, this is a surprise. I get few visitors, save for ghosts. You have the Lord Vessel. Very impressive. I know exactly what your intentions are. You seek the four kings whom I guard over. This is the key to the seal. The four kings slumber in the deepest chamber of the ruins. Use this key to break the seal and open the floodgates. Oh, and do not forget, the dark wraiths reside in a dark void called the Abyss. But the Abyss is no place for ordinary mortals. Although, long ago, the knight Artorias traversed the Abyss. If you can find him and learn from him, the Abyss may prove surmountable. Hello there. The key to the seal is... sacrificed to contain the Dark Wraiths. Mark my words, the Dark Wraiths are the enemies of man and any living thing that has a soul. They were never meant to roam again.
After you've drained the water, you gain access to the depths of New Londo ruins. And you can also go out and into the Valley of Drakes, which, I don't know, I'm sorry. The fact that it's right next to it is kind of funny, and it it looks goofier than it should, because you just see drakes hanging out on the sides. But anyways. The water of New Londo Ruins was there to trap the Dark Wraiths. These guys are strong physical attackers, and they have a special gimmick. They can suck the humanity right out of you. They are not an enemy to be trifled with. That is for sure. Now, outside of the Dark Wraiths, I wouldn't call any of the enemies in New Londo too difficult, but there are some definitely pretty disturbing opponents here, such as the giant blue blob monster human amalgamation thing. And in the room where you fight the blob monster, you're going to want to go upstairs to find the very large ember. Now, the area that has the water, like just up to your ankles, is important to note, because there's a very easy skip you can do in New Londo at the start if you just roll off the side after you've drained the water down. This is important because New Londo Ruins is pretty much the only level in the entire game that does not have a bonfire of any sort. If you die, you're going back to Firelink Shrine, so you're going to want to keep whatever shortcuts you have in mind. And because of that, I also recommend armoring up and going with the cheap jackass method, because dying here can be very punishing. Before beginning the fight, make absolutely certain that you've equipped the crest Covenant of Artorias, or you will instantly die once you drop down into the boss arena. The game even gives you one last chance after you go through the boss fog just to be safe. Welcome to the DPS test of the game, boys and girls. The Dark Souls Damage Rush, the Dark Souls Boss Rush. The Four Kings have a decent moveset, but due to the natural bulk of the Havel armor and a strong weapon like, say, the Black Knight Halberd, you can take them down quickly, and you need to, because you have about 20 seconds to kill each king before a new one spawns in. And the name Four Kings is even a lie, because there can be as many as 6 of these jackasses by the time the battle ends. This is one of those fights that I would say overall is actually fairly easy on a regular playthrough, but it becomes downright brutal once you get into the New Game Plus cycles. And he has an attack that I've never seen before this, where he ends up shooting out 8 energy waves, and that's just one of those things where Dark Souls 1 and 2 bosses seem to have those random attacks you only ever see once on a blue moon. Out of all the Lord Soul bosses, I would say that the Four Kings is by far the best of the 4 battles, and that's because every Lord Soul boss has a gimmick of some sort. But while Nito's is infinitely respawning ads, and Beds of Chaos is platforming, and well, the next one, it's not terrible, but it's not exactly an interesting gimmick. The Four Kings gimmick is just fight them well and kill them fast. And you know what? It works. Before you head off to the Duke's Archives, you may want to learn anything you can from Big Hat Logan, because he's going to head there permanently after you enter the place. Now that being said, my character has an intelligence stat of 9, so I can't learn anything. So it doesn't really do us too much good. Anyways, the Duke's Archives is the best level in the second half of the game, and in my personal opinion, the best level in the game overall. The early parts of the Duke's Archives, though, are deceptively small. Just say the boss doesn't want you delving too deep into his work, so once you take the elevator, you immediately get to where you need to go. Say hello to the mighty Crystal Knight. Say goodbye to the mighty Crystal Knight. And, surprise surprise, you're at the boss fog already. But wait. While you are fighting Seath the Scaleless, your weapons can't reach him. There's no way to melee him. In shooting him with arrows, he just heals himself instantly. I guess there's truly no way to win. So, what answer do we do here? Well, die of course. But be careful because you don't want to get cursed by his crystal attacks, so maybe put on something that protects you against curse. Don't worry, the game didn't force you into some sort of unwinnable boss fight. You actually had to die there and get captured by Seath, unless you were willing to do some tricky elevator shenanigans, but that borders on glitches, so I didn't really want to count it. Now, Seath has captured us and is probably planning to use us in his experiments, so I guess it's time for us to make a prison break. Well, now that we've escaped our prison cell, Seath decided to sick his tentacle monsters on us, and yeah, surprisingly the man-serpents want nothing to do with them either. Now, they only actually spawn in this one room in the entire game, and it's interestingly not a terrible place if you want to farm humanity, at least in the base game. The humanity sprites do have higher drops, but these ones are decent. The enemies here are definitely spooky looking, but they're not too hard to take down. However, I like that you actually have to engage with the spooky monsters and can't just run past them because, at least for now, they're aggressive. And you need to get the key to progress, which is at the bottom of the room. Otherwise, once you get to the bottom, you'll want to kill the man-serpents from Sin's Fortress, and you'll want to turn off the siren because that's what's making these Lamia ladies aggressive. Without it on, they're actually fairly passive. On top of that, keep in mind that Logan is trapped here because even if you don't really care about his sorceries, you're going to want the item that is inside his giant cell. Other than that, there's not too much left for you to do in the prison cells for now, so it's time to make our escape with the giant key door. And from here, we are at the highest point in the world of Lordran, at least I believe we are, and if you look up in the right spot, you can see the majestic sky door. After you've escaped the prison cell, the next part of the Duke's Archives involves you. Well, first off, you can reach the bottom and find a bonfire, which I recommend kindling the crap out of, because this is going to be the main hub of this dungeon. Otherwise, you're dealing with stair puzzles. You're going to be alternating their locations, using them to get to different levels, and sometimes you may want to jump off to reach a level that you're not supposed to be able to access for a while. I like this dungeon a lot because of how much you can speed through it if you know what you're doing, but still, it's a dungeon that requires you to use your head a bit. Now, I'm not the fondest of the channelers, but hey, they make up like 3 enemies in this entire place. And while you're exploring, you'll very quickly come across the cell key, which you can use to free Logan and get yourself a Firekeeper soul. Honestly, I would probably recommend doing this level earlier than the other Lord Souls, but this is my favorite one, so I save it for last. Oh, and near the end, you'll come across a golden golem in this garden area of the archives. Now, as we know from the last golden golem, they hide NPCs, and look who it is.
It was you who rescued me. Well, thank you. I am Julian de Passerini. I don't know how I ended up in that crystal. It wasn't terrible in there, but I could hardly move. I must think of some way to repay you. Oh, have you seen my? You wouldn't miss. Good brother.
Not gonna lie, I was definitely not expecting that voice when I first played this game. Then, to end it all off, the Duke's Archives ends up having, well, this pretty area known as the Crystal Caves. It's mostly just a straight line, with the main gimmick being you sometimes have invisible platforms, so you'll either want to throw down prism stones, or you'll want to see where the little snow droplets are falling to know where it's safe to go. Overall, it's not that crazy of a dungeon, but I would say I like it a lot, and I like the Duke's Archive so much compared to the other Lord Soul dungeons because it's so varied. You have this clever puzzles, good level design, different locations, and honestly, even the boss at the end is okay. I will give one warning though about something genuinely pretty shitty. Your first time coming here, make absolutely certain that you kill the clams in the area. Otherwise, they will follow you into the boss room because this is the only major time in the game that we have a main boss that lacks a proper fog gate. Either way, once they're dead, approach the primordial crystal. So now that we're at this boss fight and we know that the main boss is against Seath the Scaleless, I have to ask, did anyone else think Seath was going to originally be the final boss when they first saw that intro cutscene? Because I certainly did. I didn't know the story too well when I first played this game, so I was very surprised to see him hanging out in the Duke's Archives. Now, there's two ways this boss fight can go. It can either be very easy or a pain in the ass, and it all depends on are you going for the tail cut. If you're just going for beating the boss regularly, then it's not hard at all. But if you try to go for the tail cut, well, he spazzes out and he's very likely to kill you. And of course, the most annoying tail cut is the one that gives you the coolest weapon in the game, the Moonlight Greatsword. Now, otherwise, Seath will actually begin this fight being completely invincible, just like his first battle. In order to damage him, you need to either get around him or simply break his primordial crystal, depending on if you're on the first fight or on a rematch. Interestingly, you can actually have Seath break the crystal on his own, though I don't really think it's worth going for. It's something to keep in mind. As for the fight itself, it's okay. It's not great, but I don't hate it, and I think the idea of having a little puzzle thrown in isn't bad. I just honestly kind of wish they would have done more of the primordial crystal gimmick. So, if you fight this boss head-on, it's alright enough, and it has actually fairly goofy music. Seath is one of the highest health pools in the base game, outclassing even the final boss, but he's a scaleless dragon, so his physical defenses aren't very good. He's an absolute monster against mage builds, but the strategy of walking up and whacking him will work wonders. It's one of these cases where it's like, yes, he has a lot of HP, but he takes so much damage that you don't even notice. Honestly, if you fight him head-on, the battle ends up being pretty easy, with the exception that Seath is the one boss in the game capable of inflicting you with Curse. But after he's dead, well, that's your fourth Lord Soul. You're free to go and finish the game, but we're not done yet. I would say this is the time to go see Andre and max out your weapons, because while we're not done, the end is fast approaching. You know, though, now that we're ending this journey, something about this whole Lord Vessel thing feels kinda off. It's like a scam. You can check with Guinevere, but she doesn't really say anything interesting. She just repeats the same thing over and over, like she's not even truly there. Like she's not even real. Chaos, bitch.
Thou that tarnisheth the Godmother's image, I am Gwyndolin. And thy transgression shall not go unpunished.
Welcome, everyone, to the truth. With Guinevere dead, Darkness falls on Anor Londo, and we see its true nature. The giant enemies, the Silver Knights, all gone, as if they never existed to begin with. Ornstein was also one such illusion, as we've seen him in the future games of the series. In fact, the only enemy we've encountered that's really been here are the Mimics and Smo. Meanwhile, some new enemies have taken their place. These are the members of the Darkmoon Covenant, basically those that hunt down the sinful, the wicked, and the guilty. That being said, these guys are just NPCs with weird armor sets. One dude's rocking Balder armor, another one's rocking the steel armor. They're not that strong, but hey, it is something to keep in mind that you do at least have a couple new enemies here to face you. What's more interesting is that as you leave, the Anor Londo Firekeeper is here and she will fight you. She's actually going to use the Darkmoon Blade buff, which means that she can do a lot of damage. But she doesn't have very much HP and she's mid-rolling. So it's not going to take too long to bring her down, and we all know what happens when a Firekeeper dies. Grab yourself your 5th Firekeeper soul, and possibly your final one of the run. Now, we'll want to head to the lowest part of Anor Londo that we can go to, the Darkmoon Tomb. There are 2 ways to access this boss fight, and this is the much more violent method. You can rest at the bonfire, but outside of getting some healing, it won't matter because of a weird gimmick this boss has. Otherwise, if you want to come here in a more peaceful way, bring the Darkmoon Seance Ring and you can join the Covenant. But if not, it's time for a boss fight.
Heretic. First thou offended the Godmother, and now thou seek fit to trample upon the tomb of the great Lord. I am the Dark Sun, Gwendolyn. Let the atonement for thy felonies commence.
Here we have the Dark Sun Gwendolyn, one of the children of Gwen, and technically the only one we actually meet in Dark Souls 1 since Guinevere was an illusion, Priscilla is a grandchild, and the other son is in Dark Souls 3. As far as the fight itself goes, it's basically just hallway simulator. Overall, there's not too terribly much to say about Gwendolyn, as you're going to be advancing on him, dodging his projectiles, and getting some hits in as you go down a seemingly endless hallway. Though, hilariously, if this fight does go on long enough, you'll reach the end of the hallway where Gwendolyn will bug out because you're not supposed to get that far. I didn't get the footage of this happening, but it is really funny. Either way, with Gwendolyn dead, it's time to go back to the DLC and take out the last 2 bosses, starting with Knighthood's highest calling.
Good morrow. Is the Black Dragon posing the duress? Yes, I thought as much. He's called Calamite. Ferocious dragon indeed, even mighty Anor Londo dared not provoke his ire. I see little good coming from this, but thy intent is to persevere to the bitter end. Good, good. What is bravery without a dash of recklessness? I've taken a liking to thee, and I owe thee much for thy service to Artorias. Now, watch, and see how Goth hunts dragons. Yes. A truer shot was never loosed. That bat will be grounded for a good spell. The rest is in thine hands. I await good tidings. Ah, dragon slaying. Knighthood's highest calling.
That cutscene is so freaking cool! Oh, that's Goth, by the way. It's time for some dragon hunting with Knighthood's highest calling against the super boss of the DLC. Calamite is the most mobile dragon foe in the game by quite a bit, being able to move quickly and even glide for a short time, though his ability to fly has been haunted thanks to Goth shooting him in his wing. I want to absolutely love this fight, but he's hurt by one big issue, and that's his damn charge attack. Sometimes it's telegraphed, but other times it just happens and you're shit out of luck if you're in the wrong spot. Otherwise, it does make for a relatively fun battle, fitting of what Goth describes as Knighthood's highest calling, and a tough challenge with some quite good music accompanying it. But that also leads to my other complaint, and that's his curse attack. It's well telegraphed and completely fair to deal with, but the sound it makes is physically painful to listen to. A really cool detail about this fight though is that if you shoot him in the eye with an arrow, he'll actually panic and start freaking out for a few seconds. Otherwise, I would say Calamite is an overall fairly fun fight, but it doesn't really evolve as it's a one-phase battle, which isn't normally an issue, but this is one of the bulkiest opponents in the game. While his health is not the highest out of any boss in this game, he has enough defense and he's mobile enough that you're not going to be hitting him that often. Otherwise, what do you even get for winning? Well, I mean, you get a bunch of souls, which are good for level ups, but your trophy is a ring that doubles the damage you take. Yeah, it's just there for bragging rights to say that you beat Calamite, and for some reason they brought it back in Dark Souls 3. Gee, game, thanks a lot. Anyways, after Calamite's dead, it's time to head to the Chasm of the Abyss, as we have one last challenge to face before we truly go and end this game. Overall, there's not actually that much to say about the Chasm of the Abyss that we haven't already covered, since most of it we already saw earlier. We're now just going to go fight the boss. You'll want to take the elevator to the near the Ulusil township, and you'll want to follow the little prism stones that are broken on the ground until you find this pillar bridge looking thing. Once you've crossed that, you're at the end. It's just a matter of getting to the fog gate with a couple humanity sprites in the way. Interestingly, you can actually see the monster below you, and in at least Prepare to Die, or maybe not Prepare to Die, but in the original Xbox 360 release of Dark Souls, you could shoot at him with arrows and even kill him. I may have done this before. I may have done that on my first playthrough. I'm not proud of it. Anyways, you can still shoot him with arrows, but I don't believe he takes damage anymore. It seems like it's been patched out of the remaster, at least from the testing I did, which was admittedly fairly little. Here we are, the ultimate challenge of Dark Souls Remastered and Dark Souls Prepare to Die. The furtive pygmy and the destroyer of Ulusil that caused the spread of the Abyss, and ultimately the death of Artorias, even if we were the one that delivered the killing blow. This is Manus. This boss has aggression levels only rivaled by the final boss of the game. This fight is probably even more dangerous than Ornstein and Smo or Calamite. In fact, I would consider him a contender for the hardest boss in the game, though I've gotten a little bit better at him in recent years. He's one of the only bosses with multiple phases, as the first third of his health bar is purely physical attacks, while the rest of his HP has him use Powers of the Abyss to cast dark magic, which can kill you very quickly. Though, with the silver pendant in hand, you can nullify his dark magic attacks, and I do recommend new players use this item. I also love the attack where he creates a ring of darkness that closes in around you but dissipates before reaching him. You can use the silver pendant to block it, or you can dodge it with good timing. But if you pay attention, you'll realize that attack never reaches him, so if you're next to him, it's just free damage. This is a very risk and reward heavy fight, and he has one attack that if the first hit hits you, the rest of the combo will hit you. Although, hilariously, only the first hit does most of the damage, while the rest of it just barely chips away at your HP, so it's more like you're just sitting there looking goofy. And you know what? I can confidently say this is my favorite boss in the entire game. Even if the rest of the DLC sucked, I would have played through it just to fight Manus, but thankfully, it holds multiple fun and challenging bosses, it holds some pretty good levels, and yeah, I would say to this day this is still probably the best overall boss lineup out of any of the FromSoft DLCs. Even if I don't think it has the best bosses overall, none of them are duds. Meanwhile, you know, every single other DLC has had at least one stinker or maybe living failures sort of thing where it's not terrible, but it's not very good. And hey, as a cool bonus, I didn't do it in this fight, but if you're in human form and you saved Sif, you can summon them to help you in battle. Though the summon sign is not outside of the boss arena and instead is inside the arena, so it can be a little tricky. You have to work your way over there, but hey, with enough work and enough punishment, Manus will go down, and this very long side story, spanning almost a quarter of the game, will be complete. Excellent boss, and an excellent end to a fun DLC, although, honestly, the remastered version that comes with the game, so yeah, fight this boss. It's worth it. Now, at this point, the only thing left to do is go fight the final boss. So, before we do that, let's talk to a couple NPCs, collect some rewards, and see them one last time.
I have awaited thee. Thou hast rescued Princess Dusk, and rid us of that terrible primeval human, even halting the spread of the abyss. I salute the grandeur of thine enterprise. Please allow me to express my gratitude. I thank thee, as do we all. I will remember thee, but I will keep thy story to myself. This is the best way, for thou art come from a time far ahead. No one will sing thy praises, but yet thy greatness shall live on, for it shall be my purpose to remember all thou hast done for us. Was thine eye glancing hither? Thou needst not hide thy wonder. I am a mushroom, after all.
Thou hast defeated Calamite, wondrously played. Lord, winds blessing upon me. That beast will never take to the skies again. This great bow, I shot indeed. No dragons to hunt. I know not if a human could even operate it. But I suspect thou hast taken a gander at him. But the dark of the abyss, the swallowed poor Torres, threatens to devour our entire land of Ulasil. It seems that this dire fate is unavoidable, but seduced by a dark serpent or no, they awoke that thing themselves and drove it mad. One's demise is always one's own making. Now, do not mistake my words. I cherish my work. Wood carving is a nuanced art. I would have much to talk about with that blacksmith. In truth, how is the old chap I wonder? Still hammering away, I should hope. You know, in truth, still.
You win, please. Oh, please. Have mercy.
You. Is that not the soul of the man who fell on the spot? He was a dear friend. I wish to pay proper respect with that soul. Would you be willing to part with it? Thank you. You are very kind. Please take this. I no longer need it. May the Lord guide thee.
With all 4 Lord Souls in tow, head down to the altar of the Lord Vessel and offer them up to open the door. Welcome, everybody, to the Kiln of the First Flame, the final level of Dark Souls 1 and the end of this game. No kindling is necessary for this bonfire, as you start with 20 Estus flasks. The kiln is actually quite the beautiful final area, though there's not too terribly much in it. It's mostly a linear path, taking out the few remaining Black Knights until you reach the end, with only really technically 2 side paths you can take. The first is for some Black Knight armor that you can pick up, and hey, it has high physical defense and fire defense. That's not a bad thing for the final boss. The second, if you're in human form and you save Solaire, there will be an path you can take to summon him, and he will help you take down the last couple of Black Knights, as well as assist you with the final boss. If you struggle with parrying, I recommend doing this. However, I will be going solo for this final battle. And I just kind of wanted to talk for a second and say, Dark Souls 1 is great. Playing through this game again made me remember why I loved it so much. Now, the controls can be somewhat clunky, and I won't lie and say that the music isn't interesting, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. I do think there's a lot of good songs, but there's also some that are kind of hit or miss. Though, where this game shines is the level design. Everything just connects so well to one another. It always loops back on itself, and I think that's what makes things like Lost Izalith and Tomb of the Giants stand out as so bad, because they're just they don't do that. They don't have any extra layers of complexity. They're just here, go in a straight line through a bunch of annoying obstacles. Now, overall, I don't really think this game falls off in the second half like some people do, but I can definitely see with those 2 levels being fairly annoying. Otherwise, I don't know. I think the controls definitely take a bit of getting used to. It was definitely novel for me my first time playing, using things like R1 and L1 to do a lot of the melee attacking, when, normally you'd associate that with a shooter and the face buttons with attacking. But yeah, once you get used to it, it works well. And, well, it's kind of an interesting point. Recently I had played Elden Ring, so I was worried I'd feel awkward and out of place coming back to this game, but no, it felt natural and picked me right back up. Meanwhile, when I went to go play Dark Souls Archthrones, which was using Dark Souls 3's physics, I was thrown off heavily my first few hours playing that. I think a lot of it is just due to how different this game is from Elden Ring, that it doesn't really, muscle memory doesn't really get in the way as much here. Anyways, that's about all I had to say for just rambling. Other than, yeah, I love this game. It's a ton of fun. Though, I do need to give a little bit of warnings for this final battle. This final fight is the point of no return, where after you kill the boss, you will be getting an ending, and you're instantly going into New Game Plus. There is no post-game, things like that. Now, I will say this. This fight has the potential to be one of, if not the hardest fight in the entire game, until you master it. But I think that's enough rambling. I'll let the footage do the rest of the talking for me. Fram said I was supposed to do something, but I forgot what it was. I should go ask him. Maybe he'll know what I need to do.
My lord, bless thy safe return. Let Garth and Fraft serve your highness. We are here to serve your highness. Let true dark be cast upon the world. Our world hath witnessed.
Okay, so I actually didn't know that was going to happen because I thought that to get the darkness ending you had to meet with Koth and do all the other stuff, so it was pretty funny finding that out. Anyways, and that's Dark Souls 1 completed. While the game is not without some serious lows, it's still a fantastic game that holds a special place in my heart. Even if I do prefer Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring from a gameplay standpoint, I can't deny the masterful level design and the importance that this game had to the best aspects of modern gaming. It's challenging, but it's fair. The game will push you, but it still wants you to succeed. The music is used sparingly outside of boss fights, but it fits, amazingly, 90% of the time. Seath's theme notwithstanding. Heck, one detail about the final boss I love is that it's the only boss theme in the game that doesn't have any sort of choir. It's just the piano. And I'm happy that this game was a massive success, because it made From Software the big name they are today, and introduced me to my second favorite game series, as well as getting me into Armored Core 6. And, well, also I did play a little bit of Judge Verdict Day as well. That one's also good. Anyways, I've talked on long enough, so I'm going to wrap up the video here. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. I may try to get one more video out before Shadow of the Erdtree releases, but probably not at this point. Otherwise, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. And hey, maybe when Arch Thrones gets a full release, I'll do a video on that. Until then, see you guys when I see you. Later.